He fell off his horse again.
Oh fuck, why did I shout him out anyway?
Now make a video, or we will both stop getting views.
I don't care. I'm not making a video. I'm just gonna lie here, ineffectively trying to cure my hangover with this homeopathic medicine, and that's the end of it.
Oh my god!
Hello everyone! Today I would like to talk to you about an interview I have come across. Let's just jump right into it.
If I have to say something to the critics, I can only tell them that I have such grateful patients that come every single day to my practice.
Okay, maybe my English is too bad for the right interpretation here, but it sounds to me that either you have patients who come to you while they're already happy, or you have patients who keep on coming to you who are happy but just don't get cured, or who knows, maybe they are actually cured eventually and then they leave happy. And while the latter seems to be the optimal one, it just doesn't sound to me like that is what you said at all. Hopefully it's just my English and not the actual fact.
I have seen children who get cough and cold every 2 weeks they take antibiotics, and then after 6 months, 1 year, 2 years of homeopathy, they just come with so much gratitude. They say now everything is alright.
Chances are that antibiotics were just not the right solution. 6 months seems to be a very, very long time, in which a lot of things can happen. Among other things, instances that have nothing to do with your medicine and just happen to cure the person.
Not only my complaint, but I feel better as a person. My energy has come back. So my suggestion to them, just try it. Do not bother about whether homeopathy is logical, whether it is within the tenets of science as we know it today, whether it is making sense or no sense. Simply watch the results.
I would see how someone who had a chronic cough and got rid of it would feel better. I would feel better without the cough too. However, in those cases, usually the feeling better comes from the fact that whatever malice was there is gone and not from the homeopathic medicine itself.
Our founder Hahnemann, the one who discovered homeopathy, he wrote a book. And the very first words of the book are as follows: homeopathy appeals to the proof of its action.
Perhaps let us first define what homeopathy is. Homeopathy was created in 1796 by Samuel Hahnemann, who was a German from Saxon, and it is based on the doctrine that like cures like, or in Latin, similia similibus curentur. And the claim of this doctrine states that a substance that causes the symptoms of a disease in a healthy person would be able to cure said symptoms in a sick person. It sounds rather weird, but sounding weird is not a reason to dismiss it. However, the many tests that have proven that it is not working are a reason to dismiss it.
Just you practice this and publish your failures to the world. Everything comes later.
Well, I get the idea of trial and error, but that sort of approach has its limitations. For example, if we see that a reindeer has no apparent anatomical features that would allow it to fly, and the people who see flying reindeers in the sky are either high, drunk, hallucinating, or preschoolers, then perhaps it is not really a good idea to throw a few hundred of these poor animals off a skyscraper to test the Santa sleigh hypothesis.
All my explanation, all my theorizing, all my great ideas of this or that, or this theory, that theory, no. Once you see its effect, then we will talk further.
I am not doubting that there is a certain amount of people who feel good after your so-called treatment. What I do doubt, however, is whether these people feel good because of your medicine or because of some other reason. They could suffer under something that over time heals on its own, or maybe they change their everyday routine and avoid whatever causes their malice. For example, maybe they are allergic on whatever is in their mattress, and during your treatment they get rid of their mattress and replace it with one that does not have this allergen. In that case, they would be cured and your medicine would have nothing to do with it. That is why much more precise testing is necessary. The effects of a medication need to be based on more than merely the patient's feedback.
Don't criticize it on the basis of this or that.
With all due respect, if something gets rebutted with "don't criticize my idea," chances are that that idea stands on shaky feet. And it is a very good idea to be skeptical about such things. That applies to your ideas just as much as it applies to young Earth creationism, alien Sumerians, and heliogenders.
What is science exactly?
Yeah, what is science? It could be the systematic endeavor that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe, but somehow I don't think we two agree on that definition.
Science is not what you can understand. There are many things you can't understand. So science is not based upon what is understandable. Science is based upon what actually happens. It's based on experimentation and observation. Your explanation can follow later.
Considering the goal of science is to understand and accurately describe, and in many cases try to predict what actually happens, saying that it is not based on what is understandable is mildly misleading, I would argue. And while it is true that observation is an important component to science, it is rather disingenuous to imply that we simply sit there and explain what we see. Because one of the most paramount components of science is the testing of our hypotheses. In other words, once you have sat there and observed something and come up with an explanation, you have to test and find out whether or not your explanation is accurate or not.
Apples fell to the ground even before Newton discovered the law of gravity.
Your analogy does not quite hold up. Yes, the observation that apples fall to the ground has been made before Newton, but we're talking about observations and not explanations. When you see people coming to your clinic and they have a condition and then they get healthy, you can accept the fact that they got healthy, or at least that they look more healthy. However, the thing you cannot conclude without further testing is whether or not this change happens because of your medication or not. Or to use your apple analogy, if apples fall from trees, you can easily accept that apples fall. You cannot conclude that apples fall because there is a change in temperature.
So there are many things that happen which we don't understand today, but that doesn't dismiss it as a fact. Simply you don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This concept should go. Look at it, see the patients healed by it, see the studies that have been done, and then let science try to explain it, try to come to a point where it can be understood.
I agree. Let science try to explain it. It turns out, however, that science has already looked into homeopathy. People have used several methods to figure out whether or not it is feasible, from looking to the actual ingredients of the medicines you proposed, or in double-blind tests, or with other methods. And it was established that homeopathy does not work. It is no better than a placebo. And if you have issues with the research, then you could ask some of your patients to participate in a double-blind test yourself if you wanted to, or come up with another method that allows us to establish without a shadow of a doubt whether or not your medication is actually effective. One that excludes personal opinion and personal bias.
Whatever we speak about it doesn't make any sense till the person has seen how it works. And the one who has seen how it works would have the curiosity to learn further.
I somewhat agree. We shouldn't outright dismiss ideas without any reason just because they sound kinda wrong to us. However, that is only half the process. Because we should also question what we hear, challenge it, and figure out if it holds up to scrutiny. For example, there was this guy called Edward Jenner, and he was convinced that people who got the cowpox could no longer get the smallpox, and that they should go around and infect everyone because that would stop the spread of smallpox and therefore the death of many people. It sounds rather crazy for many people nowadays, and it sounded even more crazy back then. However, science has proven that the two are indeed related, and that if you have antibodies for one of these sicknesses, these antibodies work also for the other one. It was one of the first vaccines we have worldwide. So to bring it back to homeopathy, the idea that water has memory and that you can cure like with like, as crazy as it may sound, should not simply be discarded. It has to be tested and scrutinized, just like the smallpox vaccine, in order to be accepted or dismissed. However, unfortunately for you, at this point we do have data. Homeopathy was tested, and it doesn't work as advertised.
I'll give you a very simple example. In the old days, there was a doctor called Mahendra Lal Sarkar. He practiced in Calcutta, and he was the vice president of the British Medical Association of Calcutta branch. Those were the British days there. And at that time, from England, homeopathy was seeping into India, and it was being practiced by a few lay people.
Okay, sorry for interrupting you, but with all the nonsense you could have picked up from the Brits, did you really have to pick homeopathy? I mean, wouldn't cheese rolling, cricket, or endless chatter about rainy weather have been just as useless but far less harmful? Anyway, sorry, continue.
And the association wanted to put an end to this nonsense before it grew further. So they appointed Sarkar to give a lecture on the subject, Homeopathy is Quackery. Now, in order for giving this lecture, he went to the clinic of a lay homeopath called Rajan Datta, and he said, let me observe what nonsense you are doing here. After 3 months of just sitting with that and observing the effects of homeopathy, this very learned and talented medical doctor, he gave a lecture called Homeopathy is the Medicine of the Future, for which he was removed from the British Medical Association, and he became the first Indian homeopath with a medical qualification.
I was looking up this Sarkar, but I found no evidence of him being kicked out of the Medical Association, nor did I find any source other than homeopathy websites that claim that he was a homeopath. So there is no way for me to tell whether or not you're actually right. However, assuming for a moment that everything you said is true, I still have a huge issue with the story. And that is because a person convinced that something is or isn't working is not evidence for that something to actually work. And a story of a person in the past thinking or not thinking that something works is even less useful as evidence.
So the basic idea before we even start thinking of what homeopathy is to know that it works.
This does not compute in my head, I'm afraid. How exactly are you supposed to establish whether or not something works before you even bother to start thinking about it? I mean, let us put this into practice for a moment. I have no idea what the force is, but it's totally real and totally works, and if I knew what it was, then I would be totally a Sith, or a Jedi, probably a Sith, and use this mighty power to stop my cat from clawing the curtains. Seriously, this makes no sense whatsoever.
And then the curiosity comes, how does it work? How is it possible? Because there are, the potencies of homeopathy are so dilute that you can't trace anything substance in it, but yet it works.
You say that it does, but does that make it true? I don't know. I don't think so. In order to convince someone like me, you have to provide something that is not obviously skewed by your own opinion, but much more objective and objectively verifiable. Data, tests, something that can be replicated or checked by independent sources, something that doesn't have an incentive to be biased towards it.
Now, if we talk about the principles, the people who have seen the effect now are curious. How does it work? And the very simple explanation is as follows, that there are two views of health and of disease. One is that disease is something that affects the parts of the body. You have an asthma, so it's a disease of your lungs. You have a colitis, it's a disease of your colon. And so you treat it locally, just like you would treat a car whose one part or the other has gone out of order. But the human body is not like that. The human body is conceived as one, develops as one, lives as one, and dies as one. Everything is interrelated.
As much as I disagree with your wording, I do agree at least in part with your assertion. Yes, human bodies are not just a collective of separate organs, which live in little bubbles isolated from each other. They all work together, they are interconnected, and something that affects one of them may affect something else as well. Sometimes we can have organs interfering with each other, organs causing other organs to fail, and so on. And if medics do not pay attention, that can lead sometimes to medics not prescribing the right medication or not proposing the right solutions.
And that's the reason why asthma or colitis or arthritis or hypertension or diabetes or name it any chronic disease does not have a long-term solution in modern medicine, because you cannot treat the part and think that it has nothing to do with the whole.
Most of these conditions are very well understood, and while some of them currently are without treatment, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are without solutions. For example, diabetes is a disease that occurs when your blood sugar is too high, and there are countless long-term solutions to deal with that. Depending on what type of diabetes it is, that may be a different diet, a supply of insulin, losing weight, or perhaps becoming more active more regularly. You know what does not help against diabetes? A neglectable dose of wannabe magical water that is supposed to have memory. But let me steelman your point a tiny bit. Because on one thing we do agree, and that is that very often we treat the symptoms of a disease and not really the cause. For example, a child having breathing issues because of too much pollution in the surrounding often gets medications to facilitate breathing instead of tackling the actual issue. While there are many cases where it is unavoidable to be exposed to the problem, there are other cases where treating the cause would be far more efficient than treating the symptoms. And in such cases, treating the symptoms alone is not the right approach.
Everybody now recognizes asthma is a disease where the immune system becomes hyperactive. It's an allergic disease.
That is not quite accurate. While asthma can often be triggered by allergies, it itself is not an allergic disease. Asthma is a condition that intermittently inflames and narrows the airways in the lungs by making them swell. And this can be triggered by several things, from allergies to pollution to irritating gases or even something as simple as humid or cold air. How are you supposed to treat something that you don't understand?
So the basic idea before we even start thinking of what homeopathy is to know that it works. Colitis is something that is affected by the mind. One part is affected by the other part, and the basic problem is not with the parts but with the central controlling mechanisms with the whole, with the immune system, with the nervous system, with the endocrine system, which are all related also to the psyche or the mind.
I partially agree. Colitis is an inflammation of the inner lining of the colon. There are numerous causes of colitis, including stress, bad nutrition, and so on. And as we have agreed upon before, solving the symptoms in these kind of cases is not a good approach. It is far better to find the causes and deal with those. For example, if the cause is stress-related, then by reducing the amount of stress, you can reduce the chances of getting the sickness back. However, these are a particular subset of colitis cases, because you can also get a colitis due to an infection, for example by eating salmonella-contaminated food. And in such cases, you might be much better off by actually getting proper medication.
So the first idea of homeopathy is you cannot get a long-term solution till you address the basic problem which is in the whole organism. This is called the idea of holism. And the second one is that not only disease affects the whole, but each individual has his own specific state of disease. And therefore, we need to study who the individual is. How does he react to heat and cold? What does he like in food and drink? How does he think? How does he perceive? How does he react? And then we need to select the exact remedy based on our assessment of who the individual person is. And that medicine can stimulate his own healing mechanism to produce a long-term solution to the problem.
Alright, this is the part where I probably say something a bit more controversial. So please hear me out and then later feel free to grill me in the comment section. The idea of taking the time to figure out the person's character, the person's habit, maybe the surrounding, the nutrition, and even the state of mind can be very, very helpful in figuring out what the person exactly needs. However, the way our current system is set up, most medics nowadays are way too stressed and overworked and half the time far too busy to type stuff into a computer, like some sort of data clerk, to be able to figure these things out. And because of that, the diagnosis often lacks depth and can cause misdiagnosis. One of the main reasons homeopathy is so prevalent is because people who suffer chronic disease often can improve their lives with small tweaks to their everyday routine. And they get these tweaks suggested from homeopaths who take their time with their patients and don't have to hurry, as opposed to medics who often have a very tight time schedule and hastily prescribe medication to deal with the aftermath. And this is a challenge and a problem that we as a society should take seriously and address. It should be in our own interest to change it. However, while there are cases where homeopaths can improve someone's life, there are a lot of cases where a person needs actual medication, and that person can risk permanent damage or even death by not treating the problems or by treating them too late. And that is why, in spite of the benefits some people experience in such treatments, homeopathy is and remains very, very dangerous for our society, especially when people use it to replace conventional medicine altogether.
We talk in modern medicine, they say 70% of diseases are either produced or aggravated by stress factors. They call it psychosomatic.
In other words, 70% of cases are not an actual illness, or at least not only, and don't actually need any treatment or medication. I'm not sure where you got this data from, and if someone finds proof for it or a rebuttal, please feel free to post it in the comment section, because I would like to add it in the description. However, for now, I am more than willing to grant this number. There is only a little problem with that when we're talking about the legitimacy of homeopathy. You see, if someone doesn't actually need any medicine to be cured, then they also don't need homeopathic medicine to cure their malice, which puts in question not only the need, but also the efficacy of the stuff you're selling as a remedy.
The question is, what is stress? What is the answer to stress? And modern medicine says, okay, stop worrying, go to yoga, do meditation, don't worry.
Which is an accurate statement, even if likely ignored. If you are in bad health because of your stress, the way to improve your life is by reducing stress.
Doesn't help, because stress, again, is extremely individual. Stress is not coming from how the situation is, but how each individual perceives and reacts to reality. And that's extremely individualistic. And when a homeopath tries to understand stress, he goes into the individual's perception of reality. Try to understand, how does he perceive, how does he sensate, how does he experience stress? And then you see there's so much difference between one and the other.
And this is exactly what I meant when I mentioned the lack of personal interaction with the medic. People buy into homeopathy because often it helps them, even though the medicine itself is nothing but water.
And when you come to that point and you can address that and not remove the stress but change the perception of the individual into a more healthy perception, then everything gets better.
In a weird roundabout way, I feel like you have basically admitted what you're actually trying to debunk. If what you say is true, then you don't sell actual medicine, but wellness and placebo to combat stress. I wonder if you're even aware of your concession, or if you genuinely believe that because you relieve people's stress, you are prescribing them actual medicine. And to be honest, I wouldn't particularly mind if people wasted their money on placebo, as long as they would consider it a form of spa or wellness. But in truth, most people who use homeopathy consider it genuine medicine. And as long as this lie is perpetuated, homeopathy is a woo-woo that is very dangerous and should be debunked. I would love for homeopathy to work. We would save so much on medication and on developing medication. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Like, imagine ASMR would work. I could just sit there being like, subscribe, 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 and don't forget to hit the bell. And people would just do it. Unfortunately, that is not how it works. Subscribe, 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 and don't forget to hit the bell. Have a great evening.